guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this week on the show we have a good buddy of mine, Tommy Moffitt, the head strength coach at LSU. Tommy's coming on. I really wanted him to talk a little bit about the role he has had as a mentor to young strength coaches, and the mentors that he's had in his coaching career. Tommy's been a guy that I've leaned on several times throughout my coaching career, just to get a little bit of advice. He's the guy's got 4 national championship rings, and he's done a tremendous amount of right in this business, and obviously doing some great things at LSU. He's been the National Strength Coach of the Year by a couple different organizations, both at the college and the high school setting. He's coached at the high school setting, small college, major college. So he has a great insight into the things that it takes to reach at LSU. And we talk a little bit about that. We talk about the things that young strength coaches need to be doing to someday reach a great institution like LSU. Tommy goes into some of the things that we need to be doing to help make this profession better. One of the main purposes of this show, as well as one of the things that I respect most about him is his strong desire to make sure that family's first, and we go in a little bit about that as well. So I know you're gonna really enjoy this episode. As usual, we want to make sure we recognize our sponsor, Play Sports Performance Flooring. Play, again, Penn State loves them. They just put in most recently the wrestling room. They've done the ice hockey weight room. They've done the football weight room, main weight room, and they keep going back to them. That says something. Obviously, if you have a bad experience, then you're going to eliminate that. But they obviously are doing a great job up there, and they have a great product. That's the bottom line. So if you're in the market for sports performance flooring, they do field, turf, they do weight room flooring, they do track. They got a lot of different things going on. Make sure you reach out to them. If not, just go like them on their Facebook page. It's a good way to see some other facilities. I enjoy just seeing what some other people are doing, not just from a flooring standpoint, but what they're doing with their facilities, even from an equipment standpoint. So like them on Facebook or go to their website, playusa.com, and check out what they got going on. Make sure you sit back, get a piece of paper out. I took a ton of notes in this episode, and I know you will too. And I'll see you on the other side. Okay, guys, today on the show, very fortunate to have Tommy Moffitt with us. Tommy's one of the guys that's been a mentor of mine as a young strength coach. I reached out to Tommy really early in my career and spent a couple days with him even, and he was gracious to let me come up and spend a couple days with him, and we've been friends ever since. And so he's been a great resource for me, and I know everybody's going to get a lot out of it today. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, Tommy.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Really, really glad to be on here, and I like the show.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. This has been fun, and this is, and how this all started. We kind of talked about this was, I was, tolling around after Tennessee, after getting let go of Tennessee, and it started getting expensive going and visiting all these coaches, and trying to learn all this knowledge, and so started doing Skype. A buddy of mine said I should start taping this and kind of sharing it because it's been, it's been a huge, great resource for me, and I'm really liking where it's going, but. Tommy, tell everybody a little bit. I know you, but and you're freaking out there all over the place. But tell a little bit about the humble beginnings of being at the high school, and to now having 4 national championship rings on your finger.
Well, like you said, it was humble, and it really all began in my backyard as a kid growing up, having 3 older brothers. That were in the weightlifting, and so it all began there. And after going to college, well, let me say I really had the pleasure of having a great collegiate strength coach, and my strength coach Jack Williamson made me want to be a strength coach, and I would look up to him and say, when I grow older, that's the guy that I want to be. I want his job. And so around graduation, like everybody does, I started applying for jobs, and it was really tough back then because not a lot of people had strength coaches. And, you know, most of your strength coaches were football coaches that had been into weightlifting when they were players. And so they ultimately were the guy in the weight room. So I got turned down by my own high school. And so what I did is I took out the big, thick gray book that you used to get with all the schools listed in America. And I picked out all the different cities that I wanted to live in or that I would consider living in. And I created a database with a DOS-based program. And I sent a cover letter and resumes to 150 some odd schools. And I picked New Orleans, Louisiana. And a coach by the name of J.T. Curtis at John Curtis Christian School cold called me out of the blue, said he had my resume. And so I interviewed at John Curtis over the telephone in 1987, and I accepted the job for $13,000. And I didn't ask what I'd be doing. He just told me I could be a strength coach.
That's awesome.
So I had about $300 to my name. I hopped in my car, put every belonging I had in it, and drove to New Orleans. Had never been there. Had never met the head football coach or anything. And so I found out when I got there that I was the head strength coach, assistant football coach, head wrestling coach, assistant track coach, and the school had a competitive weightlifting team. So for 6 years, I coached at John Curtis Christian School. And when I left, I was still making $13,000. I never got a raise and really didn't care. But I got married, and my wife and I started talking about having kids. So the NSCA National Conference was in New Orleans that year, and I had volunteered to take a lot of my equipment, med balls, barbells, plyo boxes over there for the different people to use during their presentations. And when I was over there, I saw on the board there was a job listing for the University of Tennessee's women's weight room. And so I applied for that. It was actually a grad assistantship. And I interviewed with Jeff DeHoda. Jeff was the women's head strength coach there. And he told me that, I did a great job, but I was probably a little overqualified from all my time spent with football. And he said, when I get back to Knoxville, I'm going to recommend you to John Stuckey. So a couple of days later, I actually got a phone call from Coach Stuckey. And he asked if I would come in and do an interview. So I had a brother getting married in Clarksville, Tennessee. And so my wife and I drove up there, went to my brother's wedding, drove across the state to Knoxville, spent the night, got up the next day and interviewed with Coach Stuckey again for a graduate assistantship job.
Right.
And my wife, she was supposed to pick me up at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And she was late getting there. And I hung out at the weight room for a couple of hours. She got back. I said, honey, where have you been? She goes, well, I was looking for a house. And I said, what? She said, yeah, I found this beautiful little house. If you get the job, we're going to buy it. So we got in the car, drove back to New Orleans, and a couple of days later, I got a phone call, and it was the Knoxville area code. So I answered it, and it was Philip Fulmer. And, he had just been named the head coach not long before that. And Coach Fulmer offered me a full-time assistant's job. So that was my break into college. And, it was a great dream come true. And to make matters even better, we ended up actually buying the house that my wife had picked out for us.
Sometimes they know best, huh?
Yeah. So, I was there. I always call it the Peyton Manning years.
Yeah.
Peyton and I came in together as freshmen, and we left. Actually, we crossed paths in the airport. When we were in Miami for the Orange Bowl, I met Larry Coker in the lobby of the hotel, and he came over to the hotel and was because he had coached at Oklahoma State with a bunch of guys on our staff.
Right.
And I'd lost my key to the room, and I was at the front desk getting a new room key, and Larry Coker introduced himself to me and said, are you with the football team? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I'm looking for John Stuckey. Could you help me find John? And I said, yes, sir. So I made a couple calls, couldn't find Coach Stuckey. And so Coach Coker and I just sat down in the lobby and started talking. And after about an hour, and we were talking strength and conditioning and what we do, and then I started realizing this is turning into a job interview. And out of nowhere, Coach Coker said, look, we just let our strength coach go just recently. And I'd come over here to talk to John about recommending some guys for the job. Would you be interested? And I said, well, of course I would.
Right.
And he said, well, why don't, he said, I've got to go. We've got a staff meeting, and I'm going to go talk to Coach Davis. Why don't you talk to Coach Stuckey and Coach Fulmer and see if it's okay that you come over tomorrow and interview? So I went running upstairs, told my wife. That night was New Year's Eve. We had a little party, and as a staff, and Coach Fulmer and Coach Stuckey gave me their blessings. And the next day, my wife and I drove over to Coral Gables, interviewed with Coach Davis, and he offered me the job.
Wow.
And and it's funny how stuff like this works out, And then I was there 2 years, and it was a good 2 years at Miami. And again, we were headed to a bowl game. Driving, they actually back then at Miami, they would give you money if you wanted to drive to the bowl game. And, then we had 2 children. We tried every way in the world to get as much money out of that place as we could. So we volunteered. We were playing in Jacksonville. We were playing NC State in the Micron PC Bowl. And the Gator Bowl. And so we were driving from Miami to Jacksonville, and it was our first cell phone, one of those big gaudy looking cell phones. And it rang, and I looked, and it was the Baton Rouge area code. And so my wife goes, "That's LSU calling." And because I was, who's calling me from Baton Rouge?
Right.
That's LSU calling. And sure enough, I answered the phone, and it was our director of football operations telling me that they had a new football coach. His name is Nick Saban, and he had heard my name kind of tossed around a little bit and wanted to know if I would be interested in the job. So I did the right thing, and I said, well, before I, Coach Nader, before I do anything, I'd like to tell Coach Davis. And he said, that's fine. We're just calling to see if you'd be interested. And I said, I would, but let me talk to Coach Davis. So that night I talked to Coach Davis, and after that bowl game, I flew to Baton Rouge and interviewed for this job. So I don't know how many years it is.
Think about it.
Yeah, 20-something years, later, over that. Heck, 25 years later, here I am. Been here 13 years.
Well,
and only got one job that I applied for.
Right. Well, and the important thing there, sometimes it gets lost in, with young coaches, is that you wouldn't have been put in those situations if you didn't do a fantastic job and treated everybody right at the situations you had been in. Yeah, yes, there were chance encounters, but you worked your tail off, prepped yourself, and so when those opportunities came, you were able to take advantage of them, and that's the important thing with the young coaches, I think, nowadays to understand.
Well, back in the old days, I always, talking about with our young coaches, there wasn't a lot of strength coaches.
Right.
And people were creating positions at a fast rate, so there were opportunities, but there weren't a lot of them. Nowadays, there's a lot of opportunities out there, but there's also a lot of young strength coaches.
Right.
I remember the University of Nebraska at Kearney, I think it was the first university that had a strength and conditioning curriculum.
Yeah.
And now I've probably got 4, maybe 5 coaches on our staff here that have strength and conditioning degrees, and my degree is in health and physical education. At Tennessee Tech University, where I went to school, there was health and physical education, and that was it. There wasn't kinesiology or physiology of exercise or sport pedagogy. It was none of that. You were either going to be a health and physical education coach, or you were going to do something else, for that matter.
Well, it kind of takes me into the next question I want to talk to you about, because I mean, you and I talked quite a bit when the 5 strength coach rule came out, and just overall kind of state of the union with strength conditioning. I'm eager for being a giant in this profession, being a guy that's an influencer. Tons of years experience, tons more years to come. What do we need to be doing as strength coaches right now to make our profession better? And before we get into, NCAA and this, that, and the other, my personal opinion, and I know yours is as well, is we've got to kind of unite as strength coaches first.
Exactly.
Fix us, and then go.
Exactly. And that's the reason why we're in the position that we're in now.
I agree.
Because when this all went down, we weren't united, and a lot of people didn't even know about it. They didn't know about the 5 coaches rule. And so becoming united and having one voice, and both associations having one voice, and talking to the right people. And the thing that I learned most through this thing is everything has to start at home. The Louisiana State University first has to have a great relationship with our compliance department.
Right.
And then it is the responsibility, and fortunately for us, we do. And our compliance department and us formulate a plan and then present that to all the other universities' compliance departments, like you and I did.
Yep.
All this happened, and then present that to our conference. It was a conference that proposed this ruling to the NC2A, and the only people that are going to change it are our conferences. And this is what I told everyone that I talked to. We're going to be okay. We're in a state now where our department and our student athletes are going to do well, but it's the young coaches, those presently without jobs, and minorities that are ultimately going to suffer.
Mm.
And if now here I have pretty much say so. I've been here 13 years, so I've got a lot of clout when it comes to hiring who I want to hire. But at a lot of universities, and when I first got into the business, that wasn't the case. It was the head football coach who made that decision, and still today, there are a lot of head football coaches, and I understand why it's like that. But if a football coach has say-so on who that person is that he hires or who those assistant coaches are, then they're only going to be people who are associated with the sport of football. So the ones who suffer are women's tennis, women's golf, volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball. They're the ones that suffer. Mm-hmm. Football's always going to be taken care of. And at the beginning of this rule, it was a football rule.
Right.
And so ultimately the ones who suffer are the other sports and the minorities and young coaches. And that's why I was so passionate about it. And coming from me, people might have misconstrued my message. Coach Moffitt's complaining about he's only got 5 coaches. I've got 5 great coaches that do a phenomenal job. We're going to be okay. And that's what I told our compliance department. So, and I can start getting passionate when I talk about this because this, and when we first heard about it, we sat down as a staff, men and women. And I said, if you did not have an opportunity to work with football here at LSU, would you have come here? And they all said no. Even Melissa Moore, who does our women's basketball and softball teams, and who is my best assistant strength coach, wouldn't have come here and wouldn't have gotten involved in strength and conditioning had it not been for football.
Sure.
So it's a bad rule all around. And whenever I talk, and I still get a lot of letters about people applying for internships, and our internship now is non-existent.
Yeah.
And you're basically, and I tell them, it's not like it used to be. You're going to be a spotter. You can set up the weight room and help us take the weight room down, and when shipments of supplements come in, you can help us stock it. But as far as coaching goes, those days are over with.
Right.
They are here. And so, and I tell them the most important thing that you can do, because they always ask me for my advice, then what should I do? And that's to contact the compliance people at your university, contact the compliance office here at LSU, and your professional association,
right,
and voice your concerns, because it's a big deal.
Right. And, and I think it's one of those things where it's easy as strength coaches to point the finger and say, well, why didn't the CSCCA or the NSCA, why didn't they fix this? And the reality is that, we've checked out a lot of those organizations, not because they're not trying, they're doing a great job. I mean, look at where the profession is now compared to where it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The problem is that as coaches, we've checked out from writing in the journals and speaking at the conferences and and being alert to legislation and doing our part at our universities and different places, and that's what we got to fix.
Right. And Dr. Stiggins and I have talked. We've had many hour-long passionate conversations regarding this, and there's not a lot that he can do, because it's a conference issue. A conference, the presidents presented this to the NC2A, and it was voted for by the presidents and the athletic directors, and there's not really anything our associations can do. It's us.
Well, that's my point. Is it's not, the rule is the rule. It is what it is now.
Yep.
How do we fix it so that something like that doesn't happen again? Because it was, it was before that, it was a 30% protein, and it was this, that, and the other, the 8-hour rule. I mean, it's been a rule, something like that's affected what we've done. But at some point, we got to stop that to where we're consulted, and I know our organizations are trying and they're doing a great job. And Chuck, you mentioned, loves strength coaches, loves all of us. Boyd or NSCA and those guys, they're working their tails off. We got to do our part, and I know you feel the same way. When I got into the field, Tommy, I sat back and I said, okay, how can I advance in this field, and how can I do it quickly and be successful? And and so I stepped back and I looked at the Giants. And the Giants at the time were, Boyd Epley and John Stuckey and all these greats. And I said, okay, what are they doing? What are they doing very, very well? Why are they the guys that everybody wants to learn? To hire or learn from, whatever. And one of the things that I noticed about them is that they were putting out strength coaches. They were mentoring young coaches, and I know you're real passionate about that. And I know you do a fantastic job. Talk a little bit about the impact that a John Stuckey had on you, working with a Chris Carlisle and Eric Ciano, Johnny Long, Aaron Osmus. You guys had a fantastic team there of coaches that you benefited and learned from together. And then how do you go about mentoring your young coaches to where you've produced X number of big-time strength coaches yourself?
I think the most important thing is you got to find people who are passionate about helping young people. Mm-hmm. And we've been fortunate here, and I've been fortunate that I've worked with like John Stuckey, who was the most passionate person that I've ever met about helping young people be successful in life. Not necessarily because it's all about strength and conditioning either. And I learned, we would have what I call difficult people, in there in the weight room at Tennessee. And they would go into Coach Stuckey's office, and he'd spend 30 minutes to an hour with them, and they would come out and they'd be a new man. And so I would always ask the coach, what'd you say? What'd you say? And he would always say it all boils down to communication and being an effective communicator. And so that's what we've tried to do here. First, you got to find people and associate yourself with people who are passionate about helping young people and are concerned, because the championships will come if you do all the right things. But you got to really care about the people you're working with. And so when recruiting young coaches, I've always looked not necessarily for, like, one of my best young coaches now has a degree in interpersonal communication. and he also played football at Boise State. And so, and I knew with a degree in interpersonal communication, not only with a degree, but a really good grade point average in a degree field like that, and having played at such a great university, this guy is going to be a really good coach. Mm-hmm. And after interviewing him, I was like, wow, you know, what an individual. And he is truly, and he trains our swimming team. And he really loves those swimmers. And my wife's a swimmer, and I know how difficult swimmers. My wife was a swimmer here, so I know how tough swimmers can be. And he communicates so well with those men and women on that team. And so I think that's the main thing, is letting them understand first and foremost that they don't love it as much as we do. And I learned that from Coach J.T. Curtis, the high school coach that I worked for. He used to always tell me, whenever I was having problems with young coaches, he would say, Tommy, they don't love it as much as you. And so when you're dealing with difficult people, you got to understand that a lot of them came here to play football or to play basketball or to play baseball. And especially like a sport with baseball, some of those kids have never touched the barbell in their life, and they've been told their whole life that lifting weights and throwing a baseball doesn't mix. Right. And then now we want them to clean and snatch and jerk and squat and clean pull and all this. So it all really boils down to, Ron, is being an effective communicator. Nick Saban used to tell us all the time that coaching is teaching and teaching is motivating people to learn. So you got to break it down as a young coach and communicate why we're strength training. Right. And, you know, and that's the biggest thing. And teaching them some, you know, I have what's called a family first philosophy here. And, you know, I don't want my coaches here all the time. I want them, especially if they're married, I want them taking time off to spend time with their wife because they're young, they're energetic, they're go-getters, they're driven, but all work and no play, you know, makes you dull. And so I also mentor them about getting out of here. Get out of the gym, take some time off. If your wife is sick, go home and spend time with your wife. I've got one of our grad assistants' wives just had a child. I told him, and when he did come back to work, I sent him home. You know, and I think that's important too. You got to have balance.
Sure.
So there's a lot that goes into it, and not a lot of it really has to do with strength and conditioning. It's about people. It's about yourself, taking care of yourself, and then strength and conditioning is the last part, really.
Right.
That's the one that they're so good at. Let's focus on these other things that you might need some help in.
Well, it's such an important role, and it's one of those roles that, you know, when you're going through college and you're going physical education or strength and conditioning or whatever, often the piece that's missed is managing people, how to manage people. And I typically tell my staff all the time that, you know, you don't truly understand what it's like to be what it means to be a strength coach until you've been a head strength coach, because you know the buck stops with you. You have to manage a team. You have to set the direction and all those things. And that's really, you know, the sets, reps, writing a program. That's the easy part. The hard part's all that other stuff, you know. And you've done such a fantastic job with that, and I've gotten to see it firsthand. But with that, one of the things that I've always been impressed with about you has been that family first mentality that you mentioned. You know, we've hung out a handful of times. Yeah. I've met your wife a handful of times. I've met your kids a handful of times. You know, their family is a huge part of who Tommy Moffitt is. And how have you had in that dog eat dog driven profession that we're in? How have you been able to balance that? Yeah. And set those boundaries with your coaches? You know, when you got Nick Saban or Les Miles or Butch Davis, you know, coming in saying, hey, look, you know, I'm expecting you to be here 70, 80 hours. Right. How are you communicating? How are you being able to say, hey, Coach, I need to spend some time with my wife too?
Right. Well, first of all, I was fortunate that I had boys.
Helps.
So that makes it a lot easier. But then every time I've interviewed, I've told the people that I was interviewing with that my family, my wife in the early years, my wife was important. And in the latter years that my children were important. And you know, I developed a philosophy young in my career that if I was going to lose a job, I was going to lose it on the interview. I wasn't going to be there for 4 or 5 months and then all of a sudden the coach find out that, you know, if my wife calls me from home and says she needs me to come home, I'm going home. That's important to me. And you know, my wife, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it were not for my wife, because and I tell people this all the time, before I would go to speak at a conference, she would video me and then we would watch it and she would critique me. And before I would go on interviews, I would sit down and I would write up a list of interview questions and she would video me because, you know, I said early on that we're going to be a team.
Right.
So my wife has put a great deal of effort into my career as well. And so I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it hadn't been for her. So I always made a point up front to let my boss know that I was going to spend time with my family because I'm the type of person that I need time away. And I love my job. I love it. And I learned from Coach Stuckey that, you know, because people would say winning is not a sometime thing, it's an all-the-time thing. John Stuckey lived that. Coach J.T. Curtis, you know, he's the second coach in all of football to win 500 football games.
Wow.
And, you know, there's a high school coach in South Carolina, and then my boss for 6 years. They're the top winningest coaches in all of football. And he told me then, you've got to get away. You've got to get away and clear your mind. And clearing my mind is getting out of the gym and riding my bike or going fishing or hunting with my kids. Now, the whole time I'm sitting in a tree stand, I'm thinking about work. You know, I'm thinking about one of our players, and I'm thinking about next year's running program, but I'm not here at work. So it kind of takes that wear and tear off of you. And then the other thing is my kids have spent an incredible amount of time in this gym. They've grown up in every gym that I've ever been in, and it's funny when I talk to old players. I talked to Andre King, who was a wide receiver for us at Miami. My oldest son, Clay, was 4 at the time, and we were out doing some sled pulls, and there was a sled with some weight on it, and Clay picked the sled up, put it on like all the big boys were, and took off running. And when that cord drew tight, I mean, he did a backflip and landed on his head and was crying, and the players went over there and picked him up. And so, you know, that's how it's been. I've always opened this door up, not only just to my children, but our football coaches' children, our administrators' children, and, you know, Les Miles, Coach Miles' sons have trained in this gym. In fact, his sons and my sons are teammates now. They've grown up lifting in this gym. So I think that's important to create an atmosphere, and it's good for our players to see that.
No doubt.
Also. And that's the one thing that I always reiterated to those people that I interviewed, that it's good that our players see my philosophy on family first. And so that's how it's evolved.
Well, we have such an important role to model behavior.
Exactly.
You know, because let's face it, a lot of our guys that we work with didn't have dad at home.
Exactly.
You know, but they're going to be the, you know, something that I talk about quite a bit when I talk about leadership is that, you know, a lot of people will say, leadership, you know, leader, you're born a leader, you're not, you know.
Right.
And my contention is that every one of these guys are going to be the leaders of their family.
Exactly.
You know, and so we have an obligation to help them take on and learn, be the best aspect of themselves we can make them, and have a small piece in that.
Yeah, and if all you and I do all the time is talk to these guys about what we have to do today, they're going to turn us off also. And so it's important that, you know, we talk about whatever, their girlfriends or, you know, the clothes, you know, where'd you get the tattoo? What's that tattoo mean to you?
Right.
Nowadays, that's the best, whether it's a recruiting visit or not, you have a guy that's not doing well, biggest icebreaker there is what's that tattoo mean? Tell me about that tattoo. because they all got them there. But yeah, it's important that you sit down and you mentor these young men. And then when my kids are here, I've sat through many disciplinarian meetings or discipline meetings with a kid on my lap, one of my own kids on my lap.
Right.
And I've been out on the field. Brady, my youngest son, is 8, and everybody knows Brady. And he spends a lot of time here in the summertime with us. And Brady will come right out on the football field in the middle of a workout. And he's even gone so far as to come out on the field when he was probably 5 or 6. He was in my office playing on the computer, and I was out on the football field. Well, he finds a piece of candy, walks out on the football field, handed it to Coach Miles to open up for him. And being the gracious human being that Les is, he took the candy, opened it up, and gave it to Brady and swatted him on the butt and said, and everybody came running. Brady's on the field. Brady's on the field. But that's the good part about my job here.
No doubt. I got to, real quick, my son came in one time. We adopted our kids from Ukraine, and this is probably 3 years after the fact. So, the guys, they knew the story and the whole deal. One day I'm getting into the guys. I'm pretty upset. We're not having a good lift, and I got them all huddled up. And my son comes in. My wife just dropped him off, comes in, walks right through the group, gives me a high five, goes over to the bar that's set up for a squat, and starts banging out like 10 pull-ups. I turn to the guy, and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that, oftentimes as coaches' kids, they have to make, coaches' families make a tremendous sacrifice to be a coach's family. Right. But those are the types of things that, when people ask me, well, why, you've only been to 10 of your kids' games, or this, that, or the other, you miss, they get exposed to a lot of things that a lot of other kids don't get exposed to, and that's such a great thing. So another question I had is, okay, so with the new strength coach rule, with all the things that are going on right there, the limited in jobs, if I'm a young coach now, coming out of college, I'm just graduating, what would you tell me is the best path to take to get to LSU as an assistant or a head strength coach someday?
Well, the first thing, because of the competitiveness of the job market now, you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to spend those formative years in your career like a starving artist.
Yeah.
If you really want to be a strength coach. And unfortunately, that's what it's come to.
Right.
And it's not impossible. I see guys, we have young men and women right now that are interning in our Olympic sports departments that are starving, but they love it. And we had our compliance meeting this year, and I looked at all the young coaches around the room, and there are still people willing to make those sacrifices, and it's not easy, but you're going to have to do it. And then the other thing is, and this is what I tell people when they ask, you need to apply for every job that's out there. Yeah. Whether it's high school, junior college, Division III, Division II, if it's in a place where you don't want to be, you still need to apply for that job. And if you get an opportunity to interview, you need to go there and interview. I see when I go on Strength Performance Network, or when I get a clinic outline, where somebody's, like the Hammer Strength clinics, when I get those things, I look at those names on the computer screen now, and those are names that I'm familiar with that were young coaches 5, 6, 7 years ago that were emailing me about internships. And some of them are people that I interviewed for internships and grad assistantships and assistant jobs that, although they didn't come here, they've gone on and they've been successful, and now they're headlining at clinics, at national conferences and speaking. So there's still a lot of opportunities out there. It all depends on, how devoted you are to the field and what are you willing to sacrifice. One thing I always tell our players, how bad do you want it and what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get it?
Right.
And that's the way it is in the job market. But just like my wife used to do me, I used to video myself interviewing. And then I would go every time I got an interview, I would go. And my wife would say, "Why are you going on that interview? You don't want that job." And I would say, "Well, honey, you never know where this guy's going to be working next.
Right.
Or I may meet somebody on this job interview that will remember me sometime down the road." And so, like, I only got one job that I ever applied for, ever. And that was the John Curtis job. All the other jobs that I got somehow ended up, they were happen chance, really, of just, of relationships, because of relationships that I had developed.
Right.
That's how I got the job here at LSU. When I was a high school coach, I met administrators, athletic directors, old coaches, and people here at LSU coming up here for football clinics and coming up here for football practice and coming up here for spring games. So the people here were familiar with me, and I had been successful. And so it was because Nick Saban didn't know me.
Right.
It was a cold call.
Right.
It's a cold call. And I'm blessed to have been in that position. But again, it all began with the relationships that I developed over time.
Right.
And when my wife and I, when we went on our honeymoon, we scheduled our honeymoon. We went to Southern Miss. We went to Alabama. We went to Vanderbilt. We went to Knoxville. I met Bruno Pauletta on my honeymoon.
Really?
Yeah. We drove by because we spent our honeymoon, at the lake up there at Norris Lake.
Yeah.
So I met Bruno on our honeymoon. We stopped by the University of Tennessee on my honeymoon. So on our trip up and on our trip down, we stopped at the different universities.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so right on. And with what you said about taking these opportunities, these different jobs, the field is very competitive. Well, everybody will agree about that. But there's still gaps. There's still gaps between the good and the bad. So if you're good, cream's going to rise to the top, and people are going to find out about you one way or another. And getting out and taking advantage of those networking opportunities, like you mentioned. I'm the same way with my wife. That's why I do some of these things. If we're on vacation, hey, babe, you want to go read a book on the beach? Great. I'm going to go do this because this is relaxing to me. And we'll meet back up. But it's important, and I appreciate those comments. I know you got to get going. I know you got to get out to practice and whatnot. A couple of quick resources from you. Give me a quote that you live by or got plastered in your weight room.
Yeah. Well, probably the most important quote to me as an individual, Abe Lincoln. I'm going to summarize it, but he said most people are only as happy as they want to be. And I try to calculate. Well, and here's another quote that I learned because when I first graduated from college, I went to work in a health club. It was called American Fitness Sports Center.
Yep.
And our sales director there was Dennis Smith. And so he said, actions trigger feelings like feelings trigger actions. And I have to calculate an attitude that I want my clients to have, or my prospective clients to have, and I've got to have that attitude first.
Sure.
So every morning I get up and I calculate an attitude. And I say, I don't care what happens to me today, I'm going to have a positive disposition.
Yeah.
And now I call it a positive mental attitude. And I calculate a positive mental attitude every day. And then I hope that the other people around me are going to be the same because of that. Right. But it all boils down to what Abe Lincoln said, is most people are only about as happy as they want to be. And that's a summarization there.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite quote. And then there's a lot that come off of that.
I use don't let somebody else take your joy.
Exactly.
Don't let I use that with the players or with the coaches. They come in, they're complaining about a coach or a professor or something. Hey, don't let somebody else take your joy.
No.
You control that.
Exactly. Life's too short for that.
What's something on your bookshelf right now? What are you reading?
Well, I'm reading this book for a second time, and again, it's got nothing to do with strength and conditioning, but it's Unbroken.
Yeah.
The book was written by Lauren Hildebrand. Phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. Outlaw Platoon is a phenomenal book. You know, I love the military. My dad was in the military, so if it has anything to do with the military, I'm reading it. But now, as far as strength and conditioning related, my top shelf material is probably the Science and Practice of Strength Training. You know, I've read, I can't tell you how many times I've read that. Training of the Weightlifter by R.A. Roman, I think is a really good book. The Encyclopedia of Weightlifting by the Wards is great. And then the Weightlifting Encyclopedia by Arthur Dressler is, I think, a really good book. And, you know, and then I love YouTube. I love Strength Performance Network. There's so much on YouTube. And, but those books there are probably my favorite books and the ones that I go to probably most often.
Yeah. Well, you went ahead and mentioned a website there with YouTube or Sports Performance Network, both great websites.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell you, you're right. I mean, YouTube's been my go-to now. I'm looking for an idea or something. That's almost like a search engine for me now.
Right. Exactly. You're exactly right.
What about an app? Is there any kind of apps that you use for maybe a time management or even with your athletes?
Well, you know, we have iPads in here that we use a lot. So there's different drawing software that you can use, iCoach, you know, and all of that type of stuff. But now the biggest piece of software, the most influential piece of technology, in my opinion, now is the Catapult Athlete Monitoring System. We're going on our 3rd year with Catapult, and it is phenomenal. In fact, we found out this week our staff is maxed out Excel. Excel can no longer do the calculations and computations that we need with the Catapult data. So we're looking at other means. Some people from the computer science department are doing some stuff. We're working with Catapult also about coming up with some different ways to calculate that data. But, you know, GPS and athlete monitoring. Catapult is just one of a couple of brands out there, but we got hooked up with Catapult about 3 years ago, Michael Regan and Ethan Owens, and it's been earth-shattering to me. Our football staff, our volleyball team uses it, our soccer team uses it, women's basketball uses it, and it's phenomenal. You know, now you're collecting maybe 150 different variables. We're probably, on a daily basis, we're probably using maybe 10 of those. There's so much data out there, but now we're able, because we've been using it, we can grade our practices. Well, you know, we get odometer readings, velocity readings in different bands of velocity, max velocity, player load, which is the total volume, intensity, heart rate. We get all of this, so we're able to grade our practices. So we also grade it based on the intensity of a game. So after every practice, we look back over 2 years of data, and we can say today we performed at practice at 103%.
Sure.
You know, last week prior to TCU, offensively, every practice we were averaging about 140%. I call it 140% efficiency. So that I knew that we were going to perform well in the game.
Right.
And it also gauges your recovery. Yeah. So I'm huge in the Catapult. Really, really. I think Catapult is, and this is what I told our administrators, it is to strength and conditioning what the barbell was in the 60s and 70s, in my opinion.
Wow. That's a big statement right there. I agree with you. You know, what's great about the Catapult system is you know, by introducing GPS technology and accelerometer and whatnot, you're able to get not just physiological load, heart rate and all that, calories burned, all that, but you're also able to get mechanical stress on the body. And that's one of those biggest questions that you get from coaches is, are we doing too much or should we do more? You know, and, you know, it's hard. It's been subjective up until that kind of data has been available to us.
Exactly right.
to say, yes, we need to back off, or yes, we need to do more.
Right.
And that's a big factor. I'm going to talk to you more about that because I've been doing quite a bit with that as well.
Yeah.
But I know you got to get going, man. I've known you for a long time. It's easy to see just on this why you've been so successful. But for everybody watching, to go watch this guy train, work with his players, interact with his players. That's where the proof's in the pudding, and that's why he's been ultra successful and a good friend of me. So, man, I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Thanks, Ron. My pleasure.
Quick things before you let you go. What a great amount of information Tommy just provided for everybody. Like I told you at the beginning, I took several pages of notes on this one, and I know that you did as well. Please join me in the comment section at ronmckeefery.com and thank Tommy for his time and his efforts with this. It took a little bit of time out of his day, and we truly appreciate him giving that to us. Want to make sure that while you're there, you sign up for the email updates that come once a week, just to let you know about new episodes as well as new Tribe TV episodes. When you do, you get a free ebook, My Weight Room Wisdom ebook, and I think you'll enjoy that as well. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you could, comment. That helps me with rankings and all that kind of stuff, and it just, the only reason I care about that stuff is because I'm trying to help more and more coaches, and the more you can help me share this message with coaches, I truly appreciate that. At the website, there's all the links that we mentioned, that Tommy mentioned as well, so make sure you can check those out there at ronmckeefery.com, as well as Strength on Demand is a project that Rob Taylor and myself put together. It's a online archive of strength and conditioning clinic presentations, some really, really good presenters, and what I love about strength and conditioning clinics is just going and learning from some of the best. And this is an opportunity that you're able to do it from your phone, from your computer, or on your TV, whatever. You can sit back and watch 52 different presentations, and as the years go by, we'll continue to add. So, Strength on Demand, strength-ondemand.com. Check that out as well. Make sure you check back next week for another great episode, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.